Hello, I'm Dave Hart. I'm the preacher for the Winslow, Arizona Church of Christ, and I'm so glad that you've chosen to join me today. Today we're going to take a look at the topic law. Law. You know, oftentimes men don't like laws. They restrain us from what we want to do at times, and we all tend to have a hard time with it. And I'm the first to admit that some laws are just kind of dumb and silly, and there are bad laws. But without law, we have chaos. Without law, we have chaos. So we may not like laws. And I'll tell you, one of the laws that I've always had a hard time with is the speed of how fast we're supposed to go in a car. And listen, oftentimes I don't mean to speed, but it just kind of happens. And in the town where I live at, the speed's really, really slow through town. And if you're driving later through night and nobody's on the road, it's really, really hard. You don't even mean to do it, but you just look down and you're going faster than the law allows. So we struggle with laws. We have a hard time with laws. Adam and Eve had one law. Do not touch the tree, the forbidden fruit tree. Do not touch it. One law. And they couldn't keep it. They couldn't keep it. And we know because they broke God's law. Because they broke God's law, they brought great chaos upon this world. Pain and suffering and all kinds of things. And we can see this, and this is what kind of inspired me to do this sermon, is by looking out there today where they are being easy on people who break laws. Being easy on these people, not prosecuting them, not holding them in jail, having less police officers, allowing the police officers to do less to them. And we see that chaos, pain, and suffering is reigning throughout our nation. Murders and stealing and all kinds of terrible things are going on. Without law enforcement and with less law keepers, we are having a reign of chaos and death. Man is evil in his heart, and he must be restrained by both the laws of God and the laws of man. We have laws of this world, physical laws, and we need those laws to restrain the evil that's in men, but we also need the spiritual laws that God lays out in order to restrain the evil that is within men. Of course, we know there's many different types and kinds of laws in this world. When you grew up in a family, there was certain laws of the home. I'm sure we all had those when we grew up. For instance, be home before dark. You got to do your homework before you play TV or video games or go out with your friends, etc. There's laws where you work at. There's all kinds of laws out there. But today I want us to look at four laws that have to do with God and that are very, very extremely important for all mankind. There again, without law, there is chaos. And I remember when I was a young man working at the gym, I'd have some of these kids from the high school at that time. They were coming into the gym and they were anarchists. They didn't want any kind of law out there. They wanted to do away with law and just be able to do whatever that they wanted to do without any restraints. And I look at these guys and I just kind of shake my head, because if that was what was going to happen, these would be the first people that somebody else would come along and kill and take what they had. And that's just the way that it is. People, especially liberal thinking people in this world, think that people are good in their hearts. And that, if you don't have prison, you don't have laws, you don't have this stuff, that somehow all this crime would go away. And listen, it's nice to be able to think that way, but that's very naive, because that's not the way it is. That's not the way it is. So let's study a little bit here. Let's study and look at 4 different types of laws that God talks about and the importance of them. And the first one I want to look at is the law of science and nature. The law of science and nature, Romans 1 verse 20. Romans 1 verse 20. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, as they are without excuse. So what he's saying here is that man should be able to look out in nature and see the creation of nature, the order of nature, the wonder of nature, all that stuff, and realize there's a God that it just couldn't happen. That's just foolish to think about. So God is a God of order and a God of discipline, and that is included in his creation. He has created certain laws that cannot be broken. Certain laws that cannot be broken outside of something that's miraculous. And this is why we know that the world could not have come about by evolution, because it would have taken miraculous things. Creating something out of nothing is absolutely impossible. Everybody knows that. You got to have something to get something, to create something, to mold or to change something. You got to have something there in the first place. And to say that something came out of nothing is a scientific law that's impossible. It's impossible for that to happen. Why did it happen? Because God is outside the realm of science and nature, and he can intervene and has intervened in the past in miraculous ways to go outside of these laws of science and nature. So God created everything with an order to it. With an order to it. In order to have order, you got to have a mind, don't you? See, a house, let's say you're going to build a house. In order for you to build a house, you got to put your mind to work to put that house together. If you're going to build a car or whatever it is, in order to have order, you have to have mind behind it. Otherwise, you just have chaos. You have lawlessness. There's no laws of science and nature, then everything just goes crazy. So just as when we take the things that God has given us and we put them together, to build a house, to build whatever, it takes a mind to put that together and to have some kind of order to it. And we can see that order in the world that we live in, and the planets and the ocean, all kinds of things. And just think if there wasn't these laws, how important these laws of science and nature are. Take gravity. What if gravity was different in different places, or one day you could wake up and gravity would be a lot stronger and it'd be very hard to get up off the floor. The next day, gravity would be very, very, light, and you'd have to be careful that you didn't jump, because you might, jump over a building. No, it's important that God laid out these laws for our safety. But also by looking at these laws, by looking at the world around us, we are without excuse, because we can look at these laws of science and nature, and we have to understand, any logical thinking person would understand that there is mind behind these laws. So God went outside of these laws in order to do certain things, creation and stuff, but now he has set these laws of science and nature in place until the end of time. And we can be glad, because our survival depends on all these things, all these laws of science and nature that God has put in place. Nehemiah 9 verse 6 says, "You alone are the Lord. You have made heaven, the heavens of heavens, with all their hosts, the earth and everything on it, the seas and all that is in them. And you preserve them all. The host of heaven worship you. So there again, God has created everything, set an order to it, set laws to it, and we can see that order. We can see that order. This is why the whole climate change thing is phony, is fake. Oh, we can affect the climate in a certain area. If you get too much smog, of course, in that area you block out the sun. And we've had some these radioactive power plants that have melted down and have caused some issues and everything. But to think that you can change the weather around the world is just crazy, folks. It's not up to us. That's a God thing. That's a God thing. And we need to realize that. We need to realize. See, they're pushing this whole climate change. Well, when hasn't the climate changed? The climate is always changing and has always changed, and it will continue to change. But to think that we can control it is just silliness. It's just silliness, and a lot of the stuff that's come out of this whole climate change, it's causing people to die and to lose jobs and all kinds of things. We need to think, just because some scientist, some yahoo says this is the way it is, and he can't prove it, well, his opinion isn't worth any more than anybody else's. So we need to understand that there again, that God is in control of these things. God controls the earth and everything in it. And here again, he has set laws forth to help us to be able to survive, to help us to be able to lead an orderly life, because he has created an orderly world. Next, we're going to look at the laws of men. The laws of men. God talks about the laws of men. Romans 13:1-7 says, "Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities. For there's no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God. And those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the Lord. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid. For he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore you must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this, you also pay taxes. For they are God's ministers, rendering continually to this very thing. Render therefore to all their due, taxes to whom taxes are due, customs to whom customs, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor." So it tells us a lot here. It tells us that we need to be good citizens. We need to be good citizens. God has appointed these authorities for our protection. And I know and I realize that not all authorities are right, not all authorities are good, but just take the cop situation. Listen, there's a few bad cops out there. Just as there's a few bad ministers or any other profession that you want to look at, there's a few bad ones out there. There's some other ones that make mistakes. They don't mean to, but they make some kind of a mistake. I've known of cops who thought they were grabbing their taser, but they grabbed their rail gun instead and accidentally shoot somebody. Terrible things when that happens, but those kind of things happen. And then there's some people that, just shouldn't have been cops. I've known some people that have become police officers, and I've just kind of shaken my head and it usually turns out bad for them. But all of those individuals, all three of those types of individuals are very rare. Most cops do a good job. They want to do a good job. They go in it because they want to enforce the law. And God says they are his ministers. And they're to execute justice. They carry the sword. What does that mean? That means that if you are part of the law, then if the law calls for it, you have the right to use deadly force. To put somebody to death in the gas chamber or however that's done, to use your gun, your weapon, or anything else in certain circumstances, God says you're doing his work by restraining evil. By restraining evil. Folks, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to restrain evil. And if you don't stand up to evil, it just goes hog wild, folks. It's just like the school bully. Listen, I think we've all grown up with school bullies. They don't stop until somebody stops them. Oh, you can tell your parents, you can tell their parents, you can tell a teacher. They don't stop until actually somebody, at least most of them don't, till somebody actually stands up to them. We have to obey all the laws, whether we like them or not. As I said earlier, there's some laws that are stupid, at least in my mind. Some laws that aren't good laws. There's laws that have to do, for instance, what you can do with your property. And I think that at least in some places, those things go way overboard and all that kind of stuff. But one thing that is nice about us in America that we're very blessed with, that if people are putting in bad laws or making bad laws, we can vote them out and put somebody else in that will hopefully make a change. But we have to follow laws whether we think they're right or not, whether we think they're good or not. We have to follow them with one exception. We'll get into that in just a few moments. Also says we have to pay taxes. We have to pay our taxes. That's something that God says that we have to do in order for the government to have money. Now here again, I certainly do not agree with all the things our government uses taxes for, but God says I got to pay them anyway. Jesus was saying that about the Roman government, and the Roman government certainly wasn't doing good things with all their tax money either. So we are required to pay taxes. And listen, even government that's not the best government is better than no government. Even the government that's not the best government is still better than no government. Look, we can look out there and see all this craziness. These people are just nuts, going out there and doing all this robbery and all this stuff, murders. Boy, there's city after city I keep hearing about that are having the highest murder rate than they've ever had or have had in 30 years. And you still have police officers. You still have the law. They've just kind of backed off on it. Think if there wasn't no law at all. Think if there wasn't no police officers at all. Think about what would happen. It would be crazy. It would be crazy. People would be dying right and left. So we must obey the laws of men. Some laws are good, some laws are bad. And God says that even to the point of restraining evil, to the point of at times putting the evil man to death, he approves of that. They're God's ministers. They're God's ministers. We have to remember that. The police officers, those who protect us, they are God's ministers in order to help us. And what's awful funny is a lot of these people who want to defund the police have their own private security. Oh, the poor people can't have that, but they have their own private security. And I know a lot of people that don't like cops, that talk bad about cops or whatever. When something bad happens, I notice first thing they do is call an officer. Human laws are extremely important, and we would live in a savage world where truly only the strong would survive if we didn't have those laws to restrain evil men. So I said there's one exception to following the laws of men, and that's found in Acts 5, verse 29. Acts 5, verse 29, but Peter and the other apostles answered and said we ought to obey God rather than man. So the exception is when the laws of man come in conflict with the laws of God, then we have to follow the laws of God. Then we have to follow the laws of God. The laws of God are above the laws of men. So if the government or a police officer or any type of authority is telling us that we must do something that's evil, something that's wrong, something that's ungodly, something that goes against the laws of God, we are not to do that. We have to stand against that and refuse to do that. We have to refuse to do that. And, as time goes on, I'm afraid that the church is going to come in more and more conflict with government. There again, elections have consequences. And we as Christians need to put in people that at least have godly values. I wish we could put in true Christians into every position, but we know that's not possible. So the second best thing is to put in people who are going to desire to put in, laws that will follow the Bible, people that do believe in the biblical principles. But as time goes on, I'm afraid we are going to come more and more in conflict with all kinds of things. I know just a couple of years ago, there was a Church of Christ that came in conflict when it come to the bathrooms, and they actually went to court and they won the case. They wanted to make the bathroom some kind of a co-ed type situation where, I don't know, transgenders. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they had to go to court and they did win. And like I said, in cases where the law is in conflict with the Word of God, we have to obey the Word of God. Third type of law I want us to look at is the Old Testament law. And focusing on the law of Moses. We know there was a patriarchal law also. We don't know much about that. The Bible doesn't have a lot about that. It tells us a lot about that, but it does tell us a great deal about the law of Moses. In Malachi 4, verse 4 says, remember the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded him in Hebron for all Israel, with the statutes and judgments. So Malachi, the last book in the Old Testament, is telling them to remember the law and everything that had to do about it. But we have to understand, though, a few things about the old law. It was given only to the Jews. It was given only to the Jews. As I said, there was another law for the Gentiles, the patriarchal law, that was for the Gentiles. And as far as I can understand, it still was in force and ran parallel to the laws of the Jews that were given to them. But the law of Moses was given to the Jews, and they were supposed to follow everything that's in it. Everything. And we're going to see that we have a New Testament law today, and we're to do the same thing. We're to follow everything in it. The law of Moses was to keep the Jews separate, safe, and pure for the coming of Jesus. These laws were designed for them because they were going to bring in the lineage of Jesus. And God wanted them there again to be separate from the nations around them. Now people could convert to Judaism, and we know that we read in the Bible that some did, but he also was wanting his people to be very careful about being separated from all these nations. Because what happened when they did get mixed up with these nations, they started adapting the pagan beliefs, and it started to change their religious beliefs. And pretty soon you had more paganism with the Jewish people than you had those who were actually following the law of Moses. So it was to keep them pure. All these laws were designed to keep them as a pure people. They're again a moral people, a godly moral people. To keep them safe, there were laws that were put in place to keep them safe that the Gentiles didn't have. For instance, not to eat pork. Well, what was the big deal about not eating pork? Well, we know that you got to be careful of pork. Got to cook it a certain way, or it can give you diseases like trichinosis. Terrible disease, from what I understand. It's pretty much, pretty much a disease of the past, at least here in America. But it used to be something that hurt a whole lot of people. So God gave them laws to keep them safe, pure, and separated. And also, he wanted his own special people so that he could have that godly lineage all the way down to the coming of Christ. The law of Moses included the Ten Commandments and many, many, many other laws that were added after the Ten Commandments. It included both religious laws that had to do with from man to God, and it also had moral laws that had to do with man to man, how you treat man to man. So in other words, don't take God's name in vain is a religious law. It's a religious law. Don't steal is a moral law. So religious law, there again was a law from between man and God. Moral laws had to do between man to man. And God laid out both these types of laws, and he also laid out the punishment for the disobedience of those laws. And we know that there was quite a few laws that were capital punishment laws. If you did those laws, you would be taken out and stoned to death if you broke them. And some people might think, well, that's awful harsh. But if you don't separate, if you don't take care of the evil, it will grow like a cancer in any society. Hebrews 10, verse 28. Hebrews 10, verse 28. Anyone who rejected Moses' law dies without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. So there again, there was the law of Moses was very well laid out, and even for capital punishment, it couldn't just be one person. It had to be 2 or more people in order for somebody to have capital punishment for breaking the law of Moses. God took his laws and takes his laws very serious. And there was and are strong penalties for disobedience. Even for the taking of God's name in vain. Boy, think about if we were doing that today. If we were putting to death everybody that took God's name in vain. And I'm not just talking about cussing here. There's people, the OMG and all that kind of stuff. Or we I don't know if there'd be many people left in this town if the law of Moses was still in effect. The fourth law I want us to look at is the New Testament law. The New Testament law, Romans 7, verse 6. But now we've been delivered from the law, having died to what we were held by, so that we should serve in the newness of the Spirit and not in the oldness of the letter. So one thing that we have to do with the New Testament, we've got to be very careful when it's talking about law, because there's the law in the New Testament that we're going to look at, and then there was the law of the Old Testament. And the context bears it out. Is it talking about the law of Moses, or is it talking about the law of Christ? So we have to be very careful. And here, of course, it's talking about the law of Moses. The old has passed away. When Jesus died on that cross, all the Old Testament law passed away. Both the religious law and the moral law. But there's many today that don't believe that. They try to keep it. Some try to keep all of it. Some just try to keep the 10 Commandments. They'll say all the other laws are gone, but we're still under the 10 Commandments, and there's that believe that. some of them like to include parts of it, like instrumental music. Well, they played instrumental music in the Old Testament, so it's okay in the New. That doesn't justify it one little bit in the New, because they did all kinds of things, incense and blood sacrifice and all kinds of things in the Old Testament. And you can't just pick the ones you like and the ones that you want and bring them into the New. But there's many, many who do that. They'll pick certain things from the Old Testament. Some believe that the moral law has passed away, but the religious law is still in effect. And some will be the other way around. The religious law has passed away, but we need to keep the moral law of the Old Testament. But the fact is, on the cross, God took it all away, both the religious and the moral, and we are not under any of the laws of Moses unless they were brought forward into the New Testament. For instance, the Ten Commandments. We're not under the Ten Commandments, but yet 9 of those commandments were brought forth into the New Testament. So we are under them not because they're in the Ten Commandments, but because they are also in the New Testament. The one that wasn't brought forward is keep the Sabbath day holy. There are those out there who believe they're doing that today, or they think they still should do it. But a lot of them don't even have any idea all the laws that went with keeping the Sabbath day holy. Some think that the Sunday turned into the Sabbath. Sabbath is Saturday, folks. God done away with the Sabbaths. And I say Sabbaths because there was other days that were considered Sabbaths, holy days. And he done away with all of those. He took all that away on the cross. James 1 verse 25 says, "But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this one will be blessed in what he does." So the old law was done away with. We're under the new covenant now. We are New Testament Christians, and we're under a new law now. The perfect law of liberty, the law of Christ. And there's been people who have counted up the laws in the Old Testament and the laws in the New Testament. And there's actually quite a few more laws in the New Testament than there was in the Old Testament. And we need to be just as serious, because God is just as serious in the new as he was in the old, if not more so, because of the death of his son. So we need to keep all the laws that are in the New Testament. We don't have to keep the laws of the Old Testament. In fact, if we try to preach that you do, that would be wrong. That would be basically saying that the death of Jesus was for no reason, that it didn't accomplish what it was supposed to accomplish, and that would be evil to teach that we're still under the old law. But we are under the new law. We are under the new law. Now, just as some people say that we're still under the old law, some people say that we're not under law at all. That Jesus come and he died to the law, and there's no longer any law. Well, what he died for was the old law. But we see right here, there's a perfect law in the New Testament. So we are still under law, but we're under the law of the New Testament. And what are the laws? What are the laws? Well, God's commands are his laws. When God gives us a command in the New Testament, it is the law of God. It is the law of God. It's not the suggestion of God. It's not if you want to or not. It's not, you can say, oh, well, Jesus died for the law, so I don't have to do this. No, this is the law that we are under. This is the law of the New Testament.
Call from Los Angeles, CA.
John 14 verse 15. John 14 verse 15 says, "If you love me, keep my commandments." And you can change commandments to law. That's interchangeable there, folks. If you love me, keep my laws, keep my commandments. We must teach the law of God and his commandments to others and do them ourselves. And just as I said earlier, when you don't have laws of man, you have chaos, murder, stealing, arson, rape, all that stuff. Bad things happen. Same thing when you don't have the law of God. We who are Christians and the church must keep the laws of God. And that includes enforcing those laws. If somebody is sinning and they won't quit and you've talked to them, then we have to disfellowship that person. We have to protect the other people. Why do you put criminals in jail? To protect people. To protect people physically, to protect people's things, physical things. We have to protect people spiritually in the church. And sometimes we have to disfellowship people or discipline people because they are breaking God's spiritual laws. 1 Timothy 4:11 says, "These things command and teach." The things of God we need to command. We need to command in the church. Oh, we want to be so nice and we don't want to offend anybody and we just want everybody to get along. Of course we want everybody to get along. But we have got to command the things of God. Teach the things of God. Law is vital for our existence on this earth, whether it be the physical laws of the world that God created, whether it be the man-made laws that men create to keep us safe from evil men, or if it's the spiritual laws of God that make us right with God, makes our souls right, and so following his spiritual laws, it allows us to go to that wonderful place called heaven and be with him forever and ever. So we need to pray. We need to pray for those who are in government. We need to pray for our police officers and soldiers and those who risk their lives every day for us. We need to pray against evil. And we need to study God's word, study his laws and his commandments, and follow them the best that we can. And when we slip up, seek forgiveness and repentance. We need to command in the church that his laws are being followed. And we need to teach those laws to others. And we need to do it with the children on up. The children on up. Get it into their head young if we can. I want to thank you for watching this sermon today. If you're using this sermon for your Sunday service, please don't forget the other acts of worship to pray to the Lord and sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Take the Lord's Supper and make an offering to God. If you have not become a Christian, if you've not put on the Lord in baptism, I would beg you to please get a hold of a Church of Christ in your area. Go visit them, talk to them, give them a call, and talk to them about salvation. Thank you once again for watching. If you found this video helpful, please share it with others. I hope you have a great godly week. Thank you for watching.